In 1975, Stanley Kubrick filmed Barry Lyndon using camera lenses manufactured exclusively for NASA. Only 10 of these Zeiss Planar f.7 lenses were ever produced, the fastest photographic lenses in existence. NASA took 6 for the Apollo lunar program. Kubrick somehow obtained 3. That isn't speculation. It's confirmed by Zeiss, by NASA, and by Kubrick's own cinematographer. A Hollywood filmmaker had in his possession optical technology built for America's most ambitious space program. That alone would be a footnote in cinema history, except for one detail. A year before Apollo 11, Kubrick released 2001: A Space Odyssey, using front-screen projections so advanced that NASA personnel reportedly called it the most realistic depiction of space travel ever filmed. He had the agency's own lenses, and for 45 years, that combination has fueled one of the most persistent conspiracy theories of the space age. So the question this investigation comes down to is direct. Does the documented Kubrick NASA lens connection, the optics, the projection technology, the timing, constitute evidence of a secret collaboration to fake the Apollo moon landings? Or is this a textbook case of real facts assembled into a narrative the evidence doesn't support? The strongest arguments on both sides deserve a fair hearing, and the documented details, the actual lens transaction, what front-screen projection could and couldn't achieve, and why a child's sweater in The Shining became the most analyzed wardrobe piece in film history, tell a more complicated story than either side usually admits. Start with what's on the record. In the early 1960s, Carl Zeiss designed the planar 50mm f.07 lens for NASA. The purpose was practical: photograph the far side of the moon during Apollo missions, where lighting conditions demanded extraordinary light-gathering capability. The f/0.7 was, and remains, among the widest ever achieved in a motion picture lens. Of the 10 produced, NASA took 6 for the space program. 1 stayed with the Carl Zeiss collection, and 3 ended up with Kubrick. The transaction details matter. Kubrick didn't receive these Kubrick NASA lenses through some classified channel. According to documented accounts from his production team, the lenses were purchased, likely through a dealer handling surplus units. His cinematographer John Alcott described the extensive process of modifying them to fit a Mitchell BNC camera body, requiring custom engineering from Ed DiGiulio at Cinema Products Corporation. That modification process is documented and well known in cinematography circles. Kubrick's motivation was artistic and entirely consistent with his obsessions. He wanted to shoot Barry Lyndon's candlelit scenes using only natural candlelight, zero artificial lighting. The Zeiss f.7 NASA lenses made that possible. No other available optics could gather enough light. The results are technically verifiable: the extreme shallow depth of field, the soft candlelight rendering. Those are optical signatures of exactly that lens at exactly that aperture. No dispute there. So the official account: a perfectionist filmmaker sought out the most advanced optics on Earth, found them in surplus NASA equipment, and used them for art. Nothing covert. That's well supported. But the conspiracy theory doesn't rest on the lenses alone. The theory, most thoroughly developed by filmmaker J. Weidner, proposes that NASA approached Kubrick in the mid-1960s while he was building 2001 and recruited him to create convincing lunar surface footage. The logic? Either NASA achieved the actual flights but couldn't broadcast quality television from the surface, or, the stronger version, the landing was fabricated entirely because the agency couldn't meet Kennedy's deadline. Several pieces of evidence get cited. First, the front-screen projection Kubrick perfected in 2001. This technique projects imagery onto a highly reflective screen behind actors, creating the illusion of a real environment. The results were convincing enough to win the Academy Award for Visual Effects. Kubrick had demonstrably mastered the creation of realistic space environments on a soundstage, not debatable. Second, and the theory gains its real traction here, The Shining gets treated as Kubrick's encrypted confession. Danny Torrance wears an Apollo 11 sweater before walking into the forbidden Room 237. The number 237 is cited as referencing the Moon's distance from Earth, roughly 237,000 miles. The Overlook Hotel represents America. The buried horrors beneath it represent the deception. The twins represent Gemini, the program preceding Apollo. Even the room number change from Stephen King's novel, King wrote Room 217, gets cited as Kubrick's deliberate alteration. Weidner and others cataloged dozens of these alleged symbols. The argument works cumulatively. Individually, each might be coincidence, but the density is too systematic to be accidental. A filmmaker legendary for obsessive detail was communicating something he couldn't say directly. Third, a purported confession video surfaced online, allegedly showing Kubrick himself admitting to filming the landings before his 1999 death. That's the case at its strongest. Fair enough. Now, what happens when you test each piece? The front screen projection argument hits a fundamental technical wall. Kubrick's technology in 2001 produced stunning cinema, but it had visible limitations. Edge haloing, brightness fall-off, seam lines where reflective screen panels joined. Those artifacts are completely absent from Apollo footage. More importantly, and this point rarely gets the attention it deserves, front screen projection in the 1960s could not simulate 1/6 gravity. It couldn't replicate the behavior of lunar dust, which, on the Moon, falls in clean parabolic arcs without atmospheric drag. Replicating that would require a vacuum chamber the size of a soundstage. Nobody had one. It also couldn't replicate the parallel shadow behavior produced by a single light source 93 million miles away. Visual effects professionals who have analyzed both Kubrick's work and the Apollo footage reach the same conclusion. Faking the Apollo footage with 1960s technology would have been harder than actually going to the Moon. Sit with that for a second. The conspiracy theory requires that deception was the easier path. The technical record suggests the opposite. The Shining analysis. Danny's Apollo 11 sweater is genuinely in the film, no question. The room number change from 217 to 237 is real. But the reason for that change is also documented. The Timberline Lodge in Oregon, whose exterior was used for filming, asked Kubrick to change the number because management worried guests would refuse to stay in room 217. That request is on record. Then there's the math. The actual average distance from the Earth to the Moon is approximately 238,900 miles, not 237,000. The theory requires rounding in its own favor. And the 2012 documentary Room 237, which explored these interpretations extensively, presented them without endorsement. Several featured interpreters contradicted each other, reading mutually exclusive messages into identical scenes. When an analytical framework produces contradictory conclusions from the same data, that's a methodology problem, not a proof. The confession video? Thoroughly debunked. The man in the footage is not Kubrick. It was produced by filmmaker T. Patrick Murray and featured an actor. Kubrick's family confirmed the fraud. A piece of evidence that persuaded thousands turned out to be entirely fabricated. Worth remembering when evaluating evidence quality. And the logistics. During Apollo 11 in July 1969, Kubrick was in England. He famously refused to fly, a well-documented phobia, and was deep in post-production. His whereabouts are accounted for. The theory requires him to have been secretly directing lunar footage in the United States while his documented life was happening across an ocean. Beyond Kubrick, over 400,000 people worked on the Apollo program across NASA centers, contractors, and subcontractors. Maintaining a secret at that scale for over 50 years, 0 credible defections, 0 deathbed confessions, 0 leaked documents across administrations from Nixon to Biden would be historically unprecedented. Every verified government conspiracy that has been exposed, from MKUltra to the NSA surveillance programs, was exposed precisely because secrets at that scale don't hold. Someone always talks. So, weighing everything, the documented connection between Kubrick and NASA is real and genuinely fascinating. The Kubrick NASA lenses are a verified artifact of Cold War-era technology transfer between the space program and the film industry. A director obtained optical equipment designed for Apollo and used it to achieve images no one else had attempted. None of that is disputed. The conspiracy theory constructed on that foundation rests almost entirely on interpretation, inference, and symbolic pattern recognition. Tier 3 evidence. The front screen projection claim collapses under technical analysis. The shining symbolism requires selective reading, and documented alternative explanations exist for every key data point. The confession is a proven fake. The timeline doesn't work. The logistics don't work. But the Kubrick case reveals something genuinely important about how conspiracy narratives form. A real verified fact, NASA lenses in a filmmaker's equipment case, becomes the seed for a theory the available evidence simply cannot sustain. The gap between an interesting real connection and proof of vast conspiracy gets bridged not by documents or testimony, but by wanting the pattern to mean something larger. Those Kubrick NASA lenses exist. That's verifiable. They were real instruments built for a real space program, used by a real filmmaker to capture light no other optics could reach. The documented story is extraordinary on its own terms. Whether they tell a second, hidden story depends on how much weight you give symbolism over documentation, pattern over proof. The lenses offer no opinion on the question. They're just glass. Remarkable, unprecedented glass, engineered at the edge of what optics could achieve, but in the end, just glass.
Subscribe for more. We release new videos every week.